Never going to be the same again.
I'm worried about the world.
The mass chaos and crises that there was in the world, it's going to be just like that now.
This is not an accident.
How long is it going to last? Longer than, even for those of you that have some cash in the bank, way past your cash reserves.
Out of 100 people, 4 will get the message.
This thing isn't going to be over in a few weeks. This thing isn't going to be over in a few months.
The birthplace of L. Frank Baum, the man behind The Wizard.
You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
And the creator of a world etched into Americana with the 1939 classic, The Wizard of Oz.
He was a real dreamer, or literally a rainbow chaser.
Michael Patrick Hearn is a historian writing a biography on Baum.
He grew up in a very wealthy family, and then they lost it all.
As an adult, Baum had failed attempts at many careers, but always had a knack for telling stories to his children, including one about a scarecrow he'd seen with his sons during a walk.
And that night, they asked him to tell him a story about them.
But it was his mother-in-law, Matilda Jocelyn Gage, a prominent champion of women's rights, who may have led to his commercial success.
She would overhear Frank telling bedtime stories to his 4 boys, and she said he was a fool not to write them down, try to sell them.
He did, writing 14 Wizard of Oz books, the most popular in America among kids in the early 1900s. Though he died 20 years before the movie would have such an impact on the world, in Chittenango, his legacy is alive.
An idea. In the 1890s, farmers wanted to add silver to the gold standard to put more money in circulation and make it easier for farmers to borrow. In the book, Dorothy walked to the Emerald City on the yellow brick road in her silver shoes. The movie's ruby red slippers started out as silver. Silver and gold on the road to prosperity. L. Frank Baum had published the book in 1900 at the height of the Gilded Age, and the analogy didn't seem out of the question. No one else had seen these connections, but that didn't deter Littlefield. He taught his class about the Gilded Age using the book, and soon he and his students were finding more connections. For instance, in the late 1890s, the U.S. had recently recovered from the Civil War and integrated vast new territories, bringing an era of prosperity for some. But while industry and finance in the North and East prospered, farmers across the South and Midwest struggled. This led to the populist movement, uniting farmers and workers against urban elites. By 1896, the movement had grown into the People's Party, and its support of Democrat William Jennings Bryan put him in reach of the presidency. Meanwhile, in Oz, claimed Littlefield, Dorothy is a typical American girl whose hard life in Kansas is literally turned upside down by powerful forces outside her control. The Munchkins are the common people oppressed by the Witch of the East, banks and monopolies. The Scarecrow is the farmer, considered naive, but actually quite resourceful. The Tin Woodman is the industrial worker, dehumanized by factory labor. And the Cowardly Lion is William Jennings Bryan, who could be an influential figure if only he were brave enough to adopt the populists' radical program. Together, they travel along a golden yellow road towards a grand city whose ruler's power turns out to be built on illusions. Littlefield published some of these observations in an essay. His claim that this fantasy was actually a subversive critique of American capitalism appealed to many people in the 1960s. Other scholars took up the theme, and the proposed analogies and connections multiplied. They suggested that Dorothy's dog Toto represented the teetotalers of the Prohibition Party. Oz was clearly the abbreviation for ounces, an important unit in the silver debate. The list goes on. By the 1980s, this understanding of the book was accepted so widely that several American history textbooks mentioned it in discussions of late 19th century politics. But is the theory right? L. Frank Baum's introduction claims the book is just an innocent children's story. Could he have been deliberately throwing people off the trail? And is it fair to second-guess him so many decades later? There's no definitive answer, which is part of why authorial intent is a complex, tangled, fun question to unravel. in the opposite way as Littlefield. They claim it's a celebration of the new urban consumer culture. Historian William Leach argued that the dazzling Emerald City of Oz was meant to acclimate people to the shiny new America. In the end, all we know for sure is that Baum, inspired by European folk legends, had set out to create one for American children. And whether or not he intended any hidden meanings, its continuing relevance suggests he succeeded.
Credit Master said, during a hurricane, the bank only allowed me to take out $2,000 cash, but I requested $7,000, yet they were in control. And since then, I stay in control of my own money. Tangible money is your thing. Yeah, it was hard. It is even harder during a recession to get your cash out the bank, right? I got a cash amount over 7,000, but under 10,000, right, out of my checking account. And they asked me a series of questions. Where do you work? What's your cell phone? And finally, after a while, I said, well, you all didn't ask me all these questions when I was depositing the money. So when it get into a crunch or crisis, then yes, it is more difficult to withdraw, especially thousands of dollars into the bank, right? Because you do know that the banks do only keep a certain percentage of your money in the actual bank. That's why it's called reserves, right? They do not have to keep your entire amount into the bank, right? So exactly, Jesus, when the money leaves your hand, it's no longer yours, right? It belongs to the bank. And let me stop this and share this real quick. Let me share this. If you all still have checks, right? I don't have any with me in front of me. When making this statement that when you deposit your money to the bank, it does not belong to you. I know a lot of people do not even use checks anymore, but if you still have a checkbook, or you can Google this, right? Or you can Google this. Look at the memo line and then look at the signature line on your checks. Now, I still have business checks. The memo line on your check would be a straight line, right? Your signature line will be more like a dotted line, but it's not a dotted line. That signature line reads that you are the authorized user. Let me show this on my YouTube and Facebook. Signature line on a check. Now, why would a signature line on a check have to read that you are the authorized user? The signature line on a check is not what you all think it is, right? It repeatedly states authorized user, right? It repeatedly states authorized user. So let me show you all what this will look like. And thanks Phoenix 3033 again for the super chat, because people do not understand, really how much education that I really give them. I tell people all the time is that if you want to be financially successful, everything that you're not taught in school, seek to learn it, right? So this is what the signature line on a check is. And it's in a micro print reading authorized signature. Now, why does your checks have to have authorized signature? Because the banks, once you deposit that money, they have the right to trade your money, whether it's in the forex market or wherever, however they see fit, because it's no longer your money anymore. You have deposited to them, right? So once you sign, right, you then have to represent yourself as an authorized user. That's why at the top of your checks, your name and or your business name is in all caps. Being in all caps takes you away from being a person to now being a corporation, right? And now okay, Queen, I'm a corporation. Who am I incorporated to? The United States of America. You are their economic moneymaker, right? And you have to pay them taxes. And that's why most people only earn about 30 to 40 cents on the dollar, because they get their money through a job and they receive the fiat currency payment. in the highest tax brackets, which through a job. That's why many people would argue that the acronym for job is just over broke. Because by the time that you get taxed 28 to 30% out of a paycheck, and then an additional 20%, right, or 25% from your insurances that come out in your benefits, your health insurances, your paycheck insurances, et cetera, or your family insurance, right? Now you're only bringing home 30 to 40 cents on the dollar. And that's the real reason why people get into bad debt and people cannot use credit to invest, right? Because they use credit, right? They use credit or debt to get liabilities because they can't afford it otherwise, because they're making 30 to 40 cents or they're bringing home 30 to 40% on the dollar, right? Angel Rice says, preach queen, talk about the straw man. And I talked about that because if you look at the Wizard of Oz, right? If you've seen the movie The Wizard of Oz, you have Dorothy, who's always saying there's no place like home, right? No, she's always trying to return to home. Dorothy, what was home? Home was that state of peace and prosperity, right? The struggle wasn't there, right? And so she's always trying to return to that state. She's on the golden brick road, which represent the gold standard. For those who followed me, you know that I teach you all, educate you all, that until 1971, cash was pegged or it was connected to gold, meaning that you could, or other countries, right? Because in 1933, they made it illegal for citizens to own money, gold, and because they began to print currency, fiat currency, which is cash, which is legal tender, right? But gold and silver is legal money, right? As John Robinson says, words mean something, right? Words mean something. So you need to know the difference between legal tender and legal money, right? And so now this is why the price of physical, not ETFs, but physical gold and silver, the prices will increase because gold and silver, which is real money, which is God's money, right, always have to be used to reset the currency system. And we are experiencing a currency system reset, right? A currency system reset. And so if you have Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies or other blockchains or physical silver and gold, these are real assets, or land, right? That's why they call real estate, not liabilities, right? Not the PS5. Not liabilities. I know. And you know what? The most poverty-stricken homes have more televisions, right, than homes of the rich and wealthy, which have more books. They have more PS5. They have more Xbox. Why? Because people like to escape their reality. They like to look at the world of the rich and famous because they're not in it. And these things help people escape their reality. And I can understand, you know, people maybe want to invest in a PS5 just be simple as say we might be on lockdown. But you know what? If you took more time, as I gloss up again, if you took more time, or if people took more time to read books about financial education, if you're going to work for this stuff, you're going to work for cash, if you're going to work for currency, and you're not going to work for assets, you might as well learn about what you're putting hours and time of your life in to get right. Why not take our time to learn it? You know, and so this is why there will be no middle class people. There are going to be two categories after this. I just told you all, this is the worst poverty over the summer than it's been in 20 and 60 years. 8 million Americans since the summer are now in poverty. And when I came before people and told them they're going to do away with the middle class, it's not going to be any more middle class. It's going to be either the rich or the poor, right? You know, people didn't understand that, but now it's coming to light. Now it's coming to light. So back to the Wizard of Oz, right? The golden brick road represent the gold standard. Dorothy had on silver shoes in the book. In the movie, she had ruby red shoes, but in the book, it was silver shoes. The silver represent the gold standard, right? Back when the book was released or written about the Wizard of Oz, you had farmers who could not get access to credit. They could not get loans. They wanted to expand. They wanted to expand their farm, expand their products. They would not give them access to loans and credit, right, to do that. And so farmers wanted to add the silver to the dollar so they can expand credit, right? And then you have the curve, right, which represented the whiz. And once they discovered that behind the curve was just this tiny pecked image of an evil person that they thought was so strong and powerful, what that represents your Federal Reserve, right? The Federal Reserve is not as, I know they tax you highly out of your paycheck, but see what a lot of people don't know is that if you add a home-based business to your paycheck, right, it's a reason why President Trump can pay $750 in taxes and be a multi-billionaire. It's a reason why Jeff Bezos can pay $0 in federal taxes, right, and even get millions of dollars back in tax return, because they know the legal loopholes of the rich and wealthy, that the rich do not pay taxes legally and they don't work for money. They allow their money to work for them. And so when you add your job with a home-based business, that's called hybrid entrepreneurship. Hybrid entrepreneurship allow you legally to bring home more money. One of my clients, by adding a home-based business to his job, and I'm very fortunate he still has a job, was able to bring home $1,400 more out of his paycheck every month into his household and into his family, right? So the rich and wealthy know what to work for. They understand that they have to have a business entity. This one of the things that my book, Woman Thou Art Wealthy, is going to bring out. All rich and wealthy people in the Bible were business people. They had businesses. So if you continue to just be an employee and you don't transform yourself into at least a working employee and entrepreneur, you'll always be hustling backwards, right? You'll always be picking cotton, right? Eli Whitney, after the Civil War, created the cotton gin. The Civil War was about to end slavery, but they could not afford to take care of the slaves, right? And so Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin actually kept slavery alive and made the South be able to produce more cotton, and that commodity made the United States the richest country and out of all the other countries, right? And so now people are picking cotton, not in that way where they're using Eli Whitney's cotton gin, but they're picking cotton because they're chasing cash, which is made of 75% cotton and has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971, when President Nixon removed the dollar off the gold standard. So this article today, December the 17th, 2020, the US dollar is getting crushed. This is what you can thank the Fed. And what a lot of people don't know or understand is that the more money that's printed into the economy, right, the more money that's printed out or that's distributed out or given out in forms of stimulus or whatever it may be, when the government runs up its debt, you are, or we have to be the economic slaves to repay that debt by taxes, right? There is nothing that the government gives you for free, right? Nothing that the government gives you for free. So again, Morgan Stanley said that Bitcoin is on its way to becoming the world's US dollar, the world's reserve currency, noting that it has been 100 years while other previous currencies lasted about 94 years, right? So they're saying that the dollar or cash has lasted as long as run as any other currency. And every printed paper currency, every fiat dollar has failed. It's never worked. It's always failed, right? So the more dollars they print, the limitless quantities The more is in the economy, it's all about supply and demand, the less it's going to be able to buy, and which is going to cause inflation. And we will even experience hyperinflation. So, Queen, what's hyperinflation? What's inflation? Hyperinflation is the rise of unemployment and pricing. Now, when the Feds talk, or you see Jerome Powell speak about, there will be no inflation. He don't expect to see inflation until 2021. What you all have to understand is that inflation, the federal government looks at inflation as, one second, make sure this is straight. They look at inflation, they don't look at inflation as the rise in pricing of everyday goods and services, right? But inflation for everyday people, consumers, right, is increase in groceries. Gas prices increased yesterday. I saw about 20% rise in gas prices, right? In my hometown, people property taxes are increasing by hundreds of dollars by the year, right? Property taxes, that's where you see inflation for everyday people. And then also taxes on like your trash, right? People are seeing increased taxes on their trash or their garbage bill pickup by 3%. So when Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, says there will be no inflation, and then people have already seen at least a 2% increase on their pricing of their groceries. So inflation is already here. And so the more money that's given into the economy, supply and demand, the more the prices will increase in those areas. Today's world cannot afford to rely on income from a job. They must be entrepreneurial with multiple streams of income. You are so.
And I want to talk to you about this brain here, okay? You know, there was on Sesame Street, there was Oscar the Grouch or something. You know, you lifted up the trash can and there he was. Well, that's me. If you lift up my head, there's a cesspool up here. It's just nothing but rotten stuff. Because I don't trust these guys. I mean, if you trust our leaders, happy days to you. But in real life, like, you know, there's positive and negative. And too many people stay on the positive, but they don't realize what's going on in the negative. So I would rather look at the negative and the positive, because that's real life. So there's happy talk and hard talk. So you come to Rich Dad because you want hard talk, not happy horse shit, because that's what they're giving you out there. So let me tell you what the Federal Reserve is, okay? It's a criminal organization. They say they keep inflation and high employment. That's a load of crap. The real truth, the real mandate of the Federal Reserve System is keep the banks full of money. That's their only job, not unemployment and not, you know, the sound economy. That's a bunch of bullshit. So if you believe that stuff, good for you. So people want to know what's going on in that little trash can head of mine. You know, every time I see Ben Bernanke or this other guy or Janet Yellen or this last guy, I forget his name, Powell, I think that's him. Every time I see them up there talking, you know, like Bernanke was just saying, don't worry, be happy. This recession is going to be a short-lived one. Bullshit. You know, they're shoveling money like crazy so they get rich. Meanwhile, they got to give some to the poor and middle class. But this is really what the Federal Reserve, let me tell you what the Federal Reserve is. The next time you see one of these little guys, these talking heads, Bernanke, Yellen, or Powell, whatever his name is, I want you to think of the show, The Wizard of Oz, because that's what he is. The Federal Reserve, you know how, I don't remember the show, but there was Dorothy and the Scarecrow Man and the Tin Man, and they were hopping along the yellow brick road, and they were going to see the wizard. So they get to the wizard, and what did they find out? The wizard was a fraud. The wizard was this little guy hiding behind this big facade, pulling chains and whistles. That's the Federal Reserve Bank. That's Ben Bernanke, that's Powell, that's Janet Yellen. They're the wizards. Everybody thinks they're smart, but they're tiny little con men. And all of you are jumping along the yellow brick road along with your little straw man and your Tin Man and Dorothy with the magic slippers. So next time Bernanke or Yellen or Powell get on the stage, just think of hello, yellow brick road and the Wizard of Oz. This little tiny guy pulling the big strings. Thank you very much.